Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm very excited because we're doing a two-part series with arguably one of the greatest drummers in the world. This is Mr. Ash Soan. Ash is an incredible drummer who's played with everybody. Currently touring with Snow Patrol, just played Glastonbury a couple of days ago. Is Tori Amos's drummer. He's played with Delamitri. He's Trevor Horn's first call. He's a Hans Zimmer first call. This guy is everywhere for good reason. And he is the sweetest, nicest guy ever. And what a player. Stay tuned for some of the best grooves you've ever heard in your entire life. You have an amazing collection of snares here. I'm just trying to think about how many I have. When I first walked in,
I've
of course,
got about 50, I think.
50? Yeah.
50 odd.
All right. I'm gonna just put myself in here for a second. I mainly use a supraphonic, and I have found over the years it's on 3/4, maybe more, of anything I've ever recorded.
Yeah.
Because me, as the naive producer engineer dude,
Yeah.
I can make it sound like the, but I can also make it go. Kang.
Correct.
Is it a go-to for you?
Oh, without a question.
Okay, good.
That's in 1976.
Yep.
And what I think about it, I was very fortunate to play on a posthumous Bob Marley record.
Oh.
So Carlton Barrett's snare drum of choice. So all of the
See, proof is in the pudding.
all the really high, amazing sort of side stick stuff was on that around that
period.
roughly that sort of time.
Yeah.
But also, of course, Bonham was using that exact snare drum.
Yeah.
So if you think about Carlton Barrett and John Bonham, both using the same snare drum.
Yeah.
That's
how versatile it can be.
That's how ridiculously versatile that drum is.
Yeah. We were doing albums, we'd do blind tests, and we'd have the drummer, and we would record all the different snares, and no particular clever EQ or compression, just put the 57 top and bottom, come back, play them all down. Which one do you like? Oh, number 3, supraphonic. 2 songs later, let's try a different snare. Let's try the what's it called?
Craviotto. Yeah, very expensive.
I used to call it the Caravaggio because I could never remember, but I can remember artists' names.
Close enough.
Yeah, I was like, let's use the Caravaggio, and we get all these different ones, and there was one with a big huge hole in the side. I don't remember.
Right.
What it
Oh
was.
my god.
Yeah,
I've got one of those.
all of these different snares, but we tuned the supraphonic to the pitch it wanted to be.
Yeah.
And 75% of the time, it was the one that was chosen.
I know, it's bizarre. And the thing that's beautiful about them is that they're relatively inexpensive.
Yeah.
And there's loads of them. Like, that's immaculate, and that's like 1976.
Yeah.
But all the snare drums in here, that's the snare I used on Set Price to the Rain, actually. This is very cheap Yamaha Maple Absolute. I bought this off Dave Mattox.
Oh, I love Dave.
I know.
Lovely fellow.
He's absolutely fantastic.
Oh.
But it's a chrome over brass, so he took the chrome off.
Ah.
But it sounds great, and I used that on the new Snow Patrol record.
I've got
late 60s.
So I read years ago. You're a drummer. You must have gone through and read all the quotes of all the great session players, and
Some. Yeah.
Well, there was one that I wasn't sure if it was real. When I interviewed Dave, I ran it by him. I thought I read this quote in like the 80s when I was like coming up.
Yeah.
And he told me it was true. So he was working with Glyn Johns, and Glyn was using 3 mics.
Yeah.
And he comes in
Without a tape measure.
without a tape measure, just eyeballing it and moving it if it sounded good.
That's right.
I said, I heard that you said to Glyn Johns, you said, Glyn, my cymbals are too loud. And he responded, yeah, you're right. Don't hit them so hard.
Amazing.
So I thought it's kind of a cheeky thing to ask in case that didn't really happen. And he's like, no, that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
He goes, that's how I learned to be a more balanced drummer.
That's right. Well, I think recording, that's the thing that teaches you the most, is to try and be like balanced when you're playing.
Yeah.
Sound wise. Obviously, you've got to try and be balanced on the actual drums, but try and get a balanced sound for them.
Right.
And I think, and constantly going back in and out of the control room for years, like he did and like I certainly did, eventually you get a sort of sense of how you should be playing. So like, I never monitor. I did 7 years on The Voice, and I never had my drums in my ears because I would know physically what that would sound like. Like I could feel how loud the ride would be.
Right.
I wouldn't have to hear it.
That makes sense.
Kind of knew. So I get that.
Um,
Was that we talked about with Bernard Purdy?
Yeah.
And Lee saying that they let him position the overheads so that it was
That
balanced.
is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just incredible. I had a lesson with him last year, Bernard.
How was that?
It was fantastic.
I've been in America too long, so I'll pronounce it the American way. Bernard
Yeah.
Purdy.
He was brilliant. I just did an hour on halftime shuffle with him.
Wow.
And it was really incredible. Basically, he would sort of blind you with science, and he was saying things to me like, you play it on the 1, whereas I play it on the 3. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what are you talking about? And he said, Bacaro would play it on the 1. I'm like, what does he mean? And I wouldn't say that to him. I didn't say that to him. I didn't say, sorry, Bernard, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Eventually I just thought, well, I've got an hour with him. I'm going to break the code.
Because James Brown's all about the 1, isn't he?
All about the 1. But there's a 1 in all music. So I'm like, well, we're all playing it. You play it on the 1 as well. But he was talking about playing on the 3. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he's saying, he kept on going, it's a 2-bar phrase. It's a 2-bar phrase. And of course, what he's talking about is that up until that point, a shuffle was 1. So the backbeats here is always, or a Texas shuffle, it's always a double time. That's how it was perceived. And so every time he kept on saying it's a 2-bar phrase, what he meant was he would take half the snares out. He took half the snares out. And I'll show you what he was talking about. Obviously, up until that moment that he played that halftime thing, a shuffle was always this. So he literally did half the snares and made it a halftime shuffle.
Okay.
And he said to me when he was in and they were doing Home at Last, I think it was the first one he did, I think, not Babylon Sisters. And he said that when he mentioned shuffle, basically they were going, no, not that. They didn't want this. He mentioned shuffle, and they immediately thought that. They're like, no, not that.
No New Orleans kind of thing here, yeah.
And then he played, of course, he pulled out that snare and made it half time. And that's what he kept on going. It's a 2-bar phrase. And that's what he meant. That's what I realized is what he meant, is that it's like, that's what he was getting at.
Amazing.
The other thing that he kept on talking about was this 1 thing that I play on the 1, and Picaro plays it on the 1. And then I started realizing, I think I know what he means now. He's talking about, and he never mentioned the thing that I eventually figured out was what he's talking about, which was he's playing in 4/4. Rosanna is in 4/4, and the tempo of Rosanna is the important thing. So. What he's getting at is that Home at Last, obviously the tempo's much further back, and you can start feeling it in 6. So you can start feeling it as a 6 feel. And that's when I started realizing that's what he's talking about. When he's talking about the 3, he's talking about this.
I immediately knew when he started playing, you could hear the 6 straight away. Yeah.
So and that's how he thought of it. So it took about an hour for me to actually to decipher what he's getting at. But that's what he's getting at. So Babylon Sisters and Home at Last, he's always thinking he's thinking in 6, but he's playing in 4. And when he does the fills, so if you think about all the drum fills, if you go check them, they're always. they're always in three.
Yeah.
And he said, you got to make sure you tell your guitar player or you might come up, is what he said.
And I'm still into the same thing my body was.
But it was a really brilliant day, and I'm really glad I did it. And we talked about all sorts of stuff. And I said, so like 3 triplets have always been in your life. And he sort of like, he drifted off and he was telling me when he was a kid where he lived, he'd be lying in bed and the train, he said the train would come in and he goes, and it'd have to slow down near his house. And he said he would hear it going, ch, 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 ch.
Trains playing in threes.
Basically, 3's been in his life. It was sort of like a really quite a romantic, he just sort of glazed over a little bit when he was telling me that. But obviously the 3 has been a big sort of part of his life. And the 6, so basically that hour, when I talk to people now, if I'm explaining the Halftime Shuffle educational events with drummers, I cut straight to the chase. I don't take them I don't take an hour. I just say, look,
there's the things you gleaned from it.
In 6, even though he's playing in 4. And of course,
it's brilliant.
And what he's talking about with getting back to the Rosanna thing is that it's very weird thinking of it 6 at that speed. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't feel right. But certainly. I got Steve Gadd to sign these.
Oh, wow.
So they quadrupled in price overnight. But yeah, I've got, like certain hi-hats and certain crashes and rides that I use. And it's like they will just continually be on rotation, even though I've got thousands of different snares to choose from. I'll probably only use a handful. And I think they're all the same, the drummers that I know, that like, it's just like, I think Gadd's just got a bag of 5 or 6 cymbals in, and that's what he's used for decades, really. I
mean, it makes sense unless you're trying specifically to do something. Did you ever move into the trash cymbal world?
It's called a Lunar Crash, and it's a prototype that Stanton Moore developed. Lunar Crash, as in it's got loads of pits in it. Yeah. It looks like the moon. What's great about that cymbal is it reacts so beautifully well with the ribbon mic and the Hairchild. So the way that thing happens with the compressor is really unique.
But you never had like one of those square looking dustbin lids that looks like somebody's...
I have got something over there that's got holes. Yeah. And I've got a couple of things that they call them raw crashes.
Yeah. I'm like, do you mind if I grab it?
You can see one just there on the left. That's it.
Yeah.
Watch your fingers. It might have a crack in it. But that is a raw crash, and that is a raw bit of metal.
Yeah.
Siljan.
That's what I was thinking of.
They sound really interesting. And again, sort of quite amazing the way that they react with certain bits of gear, or rather how the gear makes them sound.
It was about 5, 6, 7 years ago. Everybody had something like
this. Yeah. Chinas were the one really that people...
Never dug a China. It was never my thing.
Loud as hell itself.
Yeah, and just I could never really figure out why. I suppose in metal, maybe it made sense because you could kind of hear it cut through
anything, pretty much, like a tambourine. Yeah. That drum kit over there, the one with that's 100 years old, it's really beautiful. That bass drum sounds amazing. 1920s. And there's a little hole in the top. They would put a lamp in it. Firstly, it would look really great because it's backlit. That is backlit. Mm-hmm. But it would heat up the calf skin on the playing side with the heat of the lamp and tighten the skin up. So that's actually, it's like a dual purpose while they put lamps in there.
You're sitting at a kit. I'd love to talk grooves with you. We did the Purdy Shuffle earlier.
We did Purdy earlier, yeah. That is an amazing sort of deep dive with the 6/8. And when you know that, it influences the way that it feels. And I think that's what he was getting at.
Right.
playing in 4, but feeling that whole that
Yeah.
6 thing across it.
Yeah. What about grace notes with your left hand? Are you, because that's one of Victor's things, isn't it? He kind of does this kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's really light.
Well, this snare's really high.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a 50s Max Roach. But yeah, so, grooves. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
Grace notes. I mean, it's ghost notes, grace notes, the stuff that all drummers work on, and sometimes producers won't let it be heard, but sometimes it is heard.
Well, some of it,
yeah, and
frankly, was just the
more
fact
and
that when
more
it came
now.
to mix, they couldn't set their gates properly. And I'm
Well,
not
that's
joking. And
that's one of the problems, is that it's gated. But I also understand that, because obviously I come across that same issue myself.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a drum that's not gated, then you've got a whole world of sonics that you might not necessarily want. You might not necessarily want the bass drum going down the snare like, for instance. Very close proximity. The kick sounds so great, but there's a frequency that I'm also getting. What's that? Solo the snare, and there it is. So gates. But you've got to be careful, because you will lose all that juicy, lovely stuff as well. But there's some brilliant gates, aren't there now?
these days, the technology, and of course, in your DAW, you can just draw out things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear that kick or that cymbal. Well, there's a million different tools that you can do that with. And I'd rather just spend the time and do a nice little edit than trying to use some generic plugin that's going to solve it for me,
Yes. Well, that's interesting. I heard that recently. I can't remember which channel I was watching, but someone was talking about, the plethora of plugins now.
Yeah.
So many different things. And we've not even started on AI. So God knows where that's going to go.
Yeah, it's just going to go to
And everything.
feeding it in, saying, here's the snare and that's the kick, and just remove that perfectly and keep everything else. And it's going to be doing it.
I'm 55, and I think about the sort of great opportunities that I've had, mainly with Trevor and some of the other producers in London in the early 90s and early 2000s with Trevor and Lippo. At the time, people were going, the music business is over. Delamitri we were talking about, I remember them talking in 1994 that it's ruined. And it's like, you look back on it and go, actually, it's really happening. Really happening mid-90s. And early 2000s, it was still the London was, I was working all the time in real studios. Most have gone now. And the experience, I just feel so fortunate that I managed to do that thing, turn up, and there's 2 assistants. One's making your coffee, the other one's miking the kit, getting a sound even. Just hitting the drums, making sure everything works. It's just amazing, really, if I think back at that. And then Trevor would come in, or sometimes not, and actually do it with the engineer in the end, and Trevor would just oversee it. That, I don't think it's ever going to happen again.
I think you're right. I wish you weren't, but I think you are.
And I think about how privileged I was in my early 20s and to experience that, and I wonder what it'd be like now if it just isn't. Because some people say to me, "Oh man, you had an amazing run," and I did, for sure. And I feel like I'm still very much involved in the business and working, and some pretty big names recently. And I'm on the road with Snow Patrol, and I'm going to be probably going back out on the road with Tori Amos and records for both of those artists, and everything else in between. That's still happening. But I don't think even I'll get back to where I was. The business has just moved on so much. So starting at 21 without being a grumpy old fella, which I've tried my hardest not to be. I still think it's very positive, the business, very productive, but it's just different.
Right.
This thing I was saying, and actually somebody said to me yesterday, I should just make a video on this title. The business is completely different and exactly the same at the same time.
Right.
Because there's an illusion, a myth that's sold online by gurus that it used to be so much better for everybody. It wasn't. It was so tiny and finite. When
I was working, making records daily. You just come in and you see the same people, same engineers, same producers, same mixers, all of which was wonderful, and everybody knew each other. But it wasn't like this democratization and that, 100,000 people were all multimillionaires. No, you look at like the top 40 in America over 1 year and you just stick in rock. It's probably 3 mixers mixing all of the rock albums that were in the top 40. Yeah. Probably 3 maximum producers mixing all the rock albums. So the business is completely different and also exactly the same. We're sort of sold this myth that it's different for everybody. No, it's not. Because it's
I agree with that. I agree that principally it is the same. When I moved to London, there were 5 guys, 5 drummers that did everything. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, how?
You want to be number 6?
I was number 6. And eventually, one of those guys retires and you move up the ranks. And luckily, touch wood, quite a bit around. I'm still, certainly for the UK, I think I'm still one of the guys that gets called, and I think that is, like we talked about earlier, I think that is something to do with my 30-year experience and some of those people still working, like we're talking about. I'm still getting calls from the same people I got 20 years ago. Yeah. But then the new world of social media and like how valid do you seem, and I'm luckily involved in that too. Yeah,
you kill it in that, as we've mentioned before. Yeah, you're the king of the gram.
Well, yeah. It's really weird. People say to me, have you got social media manager? And I just,
You're like, yeah, me.
It's basically me. Yeah. And actually, I say this when younger people ask me about my approach to social media. And actually, I basically paraphrase Rick Rubin. His mantra, as I'm sure you know, and he's talking about songwriting, I think, that if you've got an idea, you're working on something and you love it, the chorus or whatever you're working on, if you love it, there's a very good chance that somebody else will love it too. Right?
Good, yeah.
And I've always used that for my social media. So if I'm working on a sound or a groove or something, and I'm thinking, actually, I really dig that noise or groove or both. Put it out, because maybe somebody else will. And sometimes you get a hit. Sometimes you get 8-9 million views. Which
I agree. For me, with the engineering, I say to people, just trust your ears. If something sounds like crap, it's crap. If it sounds amazing, it's amazing.
The same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're sitting here at a drum kit. We're rolling. Yeah. I'd love to talk more grooves. I want to get the stuff from you.
Well, this, like I said, this kit is a pretty new acquisition. 1968, I'm a Gretchen Dorsey. I did have a Ludwig maple kit here, super classic, because producers see that and go, well, I know what that is, because it's one of the most recorded drum kits in history. So I bought one and I had it here for a while. And the Gretsch guys were really understanding, if I'm honest. Not that they would never, ever go, you just can't play any other brand, because the reality of that is ludicrous. Like every studio you go into, there's going to be something that's not Gretsch. So anyway, this kit, I thought, well, let me get a vintage Gretsch kit. I've got a 1963 round badge. But this is 1968, and I was lucky last year to go and see the Stones in New Orleans at Jazz Fest. They headlined Jazz Fest, and Steve Jordan now is playing for the Stones, and he had this kit, and the finish is pretty remarkable.
It's incredible.
It's called Moonglow Satin Flame, it's called. But I saw the kit with the Stones, and I was like, that is absolutely gorgeous. And I just mentioned it to a vintage guy in the UK that sources vintage drums, and I said, if you ever see one of these, let me know. And he's gone, I found you one, and this is it. 12, 16, 20. Steve's kit, would you believe, is a 20, a 12, and a 14-inch floor tom. So tiny drums, like jazz drums, really.
Yeah.
And it sounded unbelievable with the Stones. Well, it's him, really. It's back to that old chestnut.
Yeah, Dave Jordan taught me that a long time ago. He I think he did a Social Distortion album, and they ended up changing drummer. Yeah. As a result, when he came to mix, he said he was really struggling, but the drums had been left set up. He brought in who became their drummer, blanking, but the drummer came in, played exactly the same kit, didn't change any levels. Yeah. Just put on the headphones, and it's like, there's the drum sound.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing, isn't it? And then, of course, incrementally, if you get good drums, good cymbals, good mics, good room, and brilliant drummer,
Yeah.
then hopefully you're now into the magic world.
So see, look, you've got things like you've got D19 here, you've got a telephone sitting over there,
Yeah.
you've got this mono Shure mic here that you've got. If you solo these and use them independently or mix them differently,
Yeah.
the reason why I bring it up is because I think what's so important is everything is an instrument. Like that is an instrument.
Yeah.
So if you were only recording through that, you're going to play a part that works with that
sound. Yeah.
You're probably not going to be smashing the cymbals because maybe all you're going to hear is
Yeah.
So you're going to play it.
Well, that's a weird thing. That's a funny, weird. It sounds exactly how you'd imagine.
Oh, sort of like this. Yeah. We both went for the nose.
But just a tiny bit of that, like texture in the mix. And it's really great. I remember a producer, would always put a microphone here. And it was always a weird...
Yeah, the sausage mic or the versed mic.
Like, something. And they would...
Moses Schneider.
And they would call it a salt and pepper mic. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, it's salt and pepper. I don't know if that's a name
Well,
for
the salt shaker's the Altec salt shaker.
Right.
It looks like a salt shaker.
But it's an interesting sound.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It's like I don't know if it's anything like this. I can't even remember what it sounds
It's
like.
mid-rangey if it's the Altec, but it's picking up this sort of area.
But they would smash it to smithereens with a compressor, but then just introduce just a tiny bit of it to the mix, and it would do a similar textural thing.
Sort of glues the kit together in a way because
Right.
kind of it's almost like a parallel energy.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just in here messing around. I've done that because of, obviously, that is the Ringo mic, the D19, and I'll put it there, and it's
It's the everything mic.
yeah. But apparently they were cheap as chips, those microphones.
Cheap as chips.
They put it on a guitar, put it on a vocal, put it on a snare drum, put it on a bass drum.
I asked Jeff Emmerich why he used it.
Yeah.
So he used the D19 so often,
Yeah.
flicking through books. He's like, yeah, because it was plugged in.
Right. So it's like a SM57 of the day, basically.
Exactly, and Jack Douglas did a lot of stuff with John Lennon. So I kind of reflected, and I said, what was it like working with John? They were great friends, and he said, if he had an idea, he wanted it down.
Yeah.
So if that microphone was plugged in and he wanted to put an acoustic, it ended up on acoustic a lot because he just pull it down on the stand and oh, you want to do a vocal,
Yeah, the gear thing's fascinating. So this is essentially a vintage-ish sort of setup. Close mics, there's no real, that's the only kind of overhead, and there's barely anything coming from that at the moment.
And this is going through a combination of Neve mic pre's.
Mainly, this kit is mainly going through
Oh, it's going through the Heritage stuff.
the heritage gear. So I've got the Fairchild is the Shure.
Yep.
And that is, as you can see, absolutely smashed to high heaven.
Oh yeah.
Then they've got the Super 8, the Hairchild Super 8, which is, I don't know if they specifically designed it for drummers, but it's like 8 channels.
Great idea.
Neve type copy
Sure.
preamps. That's pretty cool.
Probably 8 1073 as well.
Then I've got the Motor City, which I've actually got the snare drum going through that. And then I've got the Elite series. I've got a couple of preamps as well for that.
Great.
So yeah, I call it this kit, the Heritage kit, with the mainly Heritage audio stuff.
Is the distressor on anything?
No, it isn't, but it will be in that rack eventually. I'm going to do this similar thing to the.
So the only compression that's going on is that Shure mic.
Yes.
Okay. So this drum sound that you're going to hear is untreated, and there's no EQ or anything. There's only that snare.
There's a little bit going on the drum bus.
Okay. Okay.
But mainly the compression that you're going to hear is just this one mic.
Right. Okay.
And anything, like I said, this is tiny. There's a tiny amount going through the D19. So any sort of cymbal action is coming from here. Hats included, even though I've got a hat mic too.
Which is an M160.
Yeah, which I love. Another ribbon.
So M160 on the hat.
Yeah.
You've got, is that 57
That's just
top?
a 57 on top, nothing underneath.
Nothing underneath on this one. Okay. No. Sontronics.
Yes.
Small diaphragm condensers.
Yes. There's a vintage 421 inside.
Okay. Is that a FET 47 or a
That's right.
Is it a real one?
Yeah, it is a real one, yeah.
FET 47. And then you've got the
Aston Spirit.
Which like the hipster mic from
is
10 years
another
ago.
sort of textural mic.
Yeah.
Which again I've sort of smashed. There's not much going on, but I use a
sort of got it like it's the sausage mic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of things on it that add again a sort of texture to it. Because some of the stuff that I've been, if you think about most of the loops and the things that we hear in contemporary music, mainly have derived from 60s recordings that people have manipulated.
Yeah.
hip hop things. You know, you can take them right back to James Brown and before. So I'm like, okay, well, how would they go about that? Vintage drums. I've been working on some of the grooves, and to emulate that sort of tape, crunchy sound, I've got stuff going on. Hence this thing. This is, when you hear that, when you see what I'm doing to it, you'll laugh. But and this, you know, and a combination of the sort of textural things, trying to create that vintage sound from the drums, you know.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I've got it tuned up really pretty high. I mean, it's pretty clean actually.
Sounds fantastic
in the room.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I've just been experimenting with that, really.
Well, you're incredibly contained. Nothing, I'm sitting here, you know, it's loud, but you're not killing me.
It's not crazy.
But your control between your hair and your cymbal here, and yeah, it's absolutely superb. I mean, the number one thing you'll know, and you're the proof of the pudding is in the eating with you, is when people say, how do you get a great drum sound? Start with a great drummer.
It's pretty handy to get someone in who, is together.
Yeah.
I remember there was a session at Soan, and I couldn't do it. And it was one of the first sessions that I had to say to Trevor, I can't make it. And I'm like, oh no. And it's like, now what? Well, I know now what. There's going to be another drummer called. Now, who is that going to be? And no names will be mentioned, but somebody was called and they were a great drummer. And I thought, oh, wow. Okay, well, I've lost those tracks. And I went back the following week to do some more tracks. And Trevor said, oh, we've got to do those other two that you didn't do last week. And I was like, oh, but didn't you? They went, yeah, it didn't work out. And then he left the room. So then I talked to the engineer. I was like, what's that about? You know? He said, he said, the dude sounded really great in the room. But he said he wasn't together within himself.
Mm.
And what he meant was things landing. At the same time, which I think is the most basic thing in the world. Because when it comes to editing, they don't know. And, you know, the reality of it is with pop music, I mean, I'm not talking about jazz or anything that is improvisational music, but pop music, certainly with Trevor Horn, there's going to be an edit. And they basically need to find a spot.
Oh, I have a very strong theory based on actual real experience of working with 100 drummers. You want to know what you already know the answer. This is more a rhetorical question for you, but the best way to sort out the men from the boys is give me a 4 on the floor.
Yeah. And see,
because the way that relationship between that kick and snare, if it's like moving all over the place,
that's
it's ahead and behind,
right?
It's impossible to work.
And then it's like, well, where do you come in and where do you slice, basically, in the old terminology? And basically, the drummer sounded great in the room, and they recorded, and then when they went in post session to do some stuff, they were just like, oh. And I think by that point, they'd already hired me to come in the following week to do some other tracks. And I think Trevor just said, oh, Ash can re-record them. And that was that was something I'd never even knew about. Yeah. So actually being together within yourself. And so not only dynamically, but like literally landing at the same time as your other limbs, the basic stuff.
I feel like this is a great conversation because I feel like one of the things, like John Bonham has come up a couple of times. Bonham's thing about the way he played the hat, either side of the snare, he was early, late, but it gave a hurt.
But he was consistent.
He was consistent, so it becomes a feel.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I remember working with Don Smith playing bass with, actually it was with Brian McLeod.
Right.
And I'm playing bass against this track, and he's like, I want it to feel like you're always landing after him all the time. So instead of being like da 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 da, it's got to be like you know. I want it to just be like lay. And after a while, you kind of just you create your own groove.
Yeah.
And that doesn't map to a grid, but it creates this hypnotic feel of the relationship between the bass and the drums. And I feel like editing has just taken that away.
Yeah. Well, digital recording is an interesting world regarding not only edits, but like quantized now and all that is another thing. You spend your life trying to get some sort of feel, and then sometimes it just gets completely erased. It's amazing.
Ringo's
that thing. Yeah.
I know drummers that lift their shoulders.
Me too. Yeah, I did.
Because it adds a little bit of time, so the snare can just be slightly later.
Yeah.
Doing this can make it just swing a little bit later.
Yeah.
It's just physics rather than going.
I did about 3 tracks on that, but there was a moment where Trevor called me in to do a track on it, and I couldn't do it. Nightmare number 2, and he used the engineer. Absolutely isn't a drummer, but they cobbled this drum performance together with the notion of let's make something work, and then when Ash is back, he can re-record it and it'll be fine. Then the following week, I went in to replace the engineer's drums that were literally chopped to like
hi-hats.
But they'd fallen in love with the feel.
Sure.
And they're like, can you get... I was like, I don't know if I can. And I really tried. And I couldn't do it. And in the end, the chopped up demo drums made, I can't remember which track it was, made it, and I didn't, because I just couldn't get anywhere near it, because they manipulated and moved it in a certain way that I just couldn't quite get my head around how they chopped it. And that is alive and well on drum sessions.
Tell you the other side. Do you ever work with Andrew Frampton?
No.
I wrote a song with him in a band. I had this Canadian guitar, and it had plastic braces, for real, like plastic bracing inside, and a DI. So we're in a room writing a song. So I've DI'd this cheap acoustic, and we wrote the song, and we did it, demoed it.
This is
to click.
Yeah.
And so, we got a drummer in. I can't remember who played on it, but, great drummer. So we played drums, so we played bass. I did some electric overdubs, everything. We got everything ready. And I sent it off to him. And he's like, it just doesn't feel good. So what did you do? Well, I was like, added drums, added bass. Like, you go. And I said, and I replayed the acoustic. He said, you did what?
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's a DI, cheap, crappy sound acoustic. He's like,
and that was it.
We wrote the song to
on
you
that.
playing that,
I get it.
and you have completely changed it.
Yeah.
So I went back and put, unmuted my crappy, DI'd, awful sounding. It was really bad sounding. And that's what the single came out.
It felt right again.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's a great musician said to me once, the demoitis is what we're talking about in some respects. And it certainly was with that track. Yeah. Like they'd been working on it for a week with those drums, and then the great Ash Soan's going to come in and re-record the drums. And it was like, shit, it doesn't feel the same. Yeah. And the demoitis thing, but there was a great musician said to me, get in early. I said, what do you mean? He said, get in early, get in on the demo stage, because the chances of your performance making it are high.
Yeah.
Because of that thing. Because they'll be writing around your part. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting tip. If you can. Billy Idol with Trevor. Trevor had got a new manager. They didn't last very long. I can't even remember the name. I tracked about 3 or 4 songs at Soan. Trevor's manager said, you've got to do a demo rate because we're going to go to the US and retrack them. And I went, that's really weird. Trevor doesn't do demos. He does, when he's working on a track, he's working on a track.
Of course, yeah.
If he's working on music, he's working on music. He's not going to go and it never happened to me before. Anyway, quite rightly, I was right. Those tracks, they did make it with my drums. And actually, in the end, it was a brilliant moment for me personally. Trevor he said, what are you doing in September at that time? I can't remember what year it was. And I said, I'm doing The Voice. He said, so you can't come to LA because you want to finish the record? And I was like, no, I can't. So Billy and Steve Stevens flew to London, and we finished the album in the evenings when I'd finished working on The Voice.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I've really felt that I earned my rock and roll wings on that record. Well, it was really interesting. And I...
How much they valued you?
Well, I think that Trevor valued the productivity that we have when we're together. So he can get stuff done with me, and he can say things to me, and we can do things, and I understand him. At that point, we'd done a lot. And I think that was worth it. Just doing that. Just
I have another theory as well.
It will help the flow of the record.
You know, and what was smart about it is they're all West Coasters.
Yeah.
So at 7 p.m., it's 11 a.m.
Right.
So they just fly, they land, they don't have to change their sleep schedule. They're ready to go at 7 p.m. to start tracking these. So
yeah, maybe
everything was genius.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I do remember turning up and walking in because they'd heard the demos, the 3 or 4 tracks that I played on. And I remember walking into Studio One.
Steve's no slouch. He would know it's great.
Unbelievable.
He's a great guitar player. Yeah.
Unbelievable musician. Black hair, black fingernails, black trousers, black boots, black eyeliner, just oozed rock and roll. Sure. I walk in and
cargo shorts and a t-shirt.
I had a leather jacket on, and he thought that I'd ridden. He said, "Oh man, you ride here?" I was like, "Oh God, no, I don't do that." And I think initially he thought, well, this guy, I mean, literally was like looking me up and down going, like, it doesn't compute that the drums we've heard is this guy. But it took a few days, and eventually Steve said to me, he goes, "Hey man, you're a pretty fucking cool drummer." I was like, "Yes."
Yeah.
Steve Stevens. But it was a really brilliant record to work on. And we cut together. So Steve, me, Anthony, we did vocals together. It was the whole thing was
It's amazing.
Old school, like Trev. He understands that thing. Even if you just get 2 musicians tracking together, some magic might happen.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah. And he would always try and get some more than one person to track together, just in case something goes somewhere because of 2 of you. It's a really brilliant way of thinking.
Definitely, yeah.
But that's I really enjoyed that record. It was fun. I worked with Van, and thinking about drummers and Van Morrison, I did a gig at the Albert Hall, and it was a Lead Belly tribute show. Lots of different acts, George Holland, and main act was Van. And I was talking to one of his old drummers, and they were like, "Good luck with that." I'm like, "Why? What's the story?" And they said, "Van, drummers are his area of annoyance." I was like, "Okay." So I was dreading this moment of actually meeting and playing for him. And he came to sound check. We started, they closed the stage. They closed, obviously the room was closed, but they shut down everything. So the people that were in that room were only the people allowed in. And his road manager, I think at the time, said, "You can't play this quiet enough." And I'm like, "Okay." And it was Astral Weeks. So I got a little brush and it's like, and it's probably not going to translate with the drums.
No.
But I did it with a brush, 2 brushes, at the Albert Hall, probably about that volume. And he came out and he started singing it, and it was absolutely beautiful. And I didn't get much louder than that. And he's got the weight, he's got the bass drum in wedges, and so he's got a little bit of low end coming through. And it was beautiful. And I really enjoyed playing with him. And he didn't say anything to me at all. I thought, hopefully this is good. So then we started doing Midnight Special.
Mm-hmm.
And I played it in a sort of like Charlie Watts. Type really simple bass drums. And he turned around and he walks over to me and he goes, "No, more bass drums." Like as I'm playing, he's going, "More bass drums." So I started going, "That's it." And then he turned back, and that's the only thing he said to me for the entire sound check and the entire gig. And he had a really, really good time. And I went back to the drummer that I talked to about it, and he went, "How did that Van gig go?" And I went, "It was great." And he went, "What?" I was like, he was amazing. He goes, "Oh, I just hope we never work with him again." Because he's suggesting that the next time it will be a nightmare. But apparently he found out he was knighted a couple of days before we did the show. So he was in a very good mood.
Oh, okay.
So Van, we love you. And I would work with him, no question, work with him again. Again, the vocal.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as he opens his mouth,
Yeah.
for me,
All my hairs are standing on.
All is
Just
forgiven.
thinking about it.
It's just
St. Dominic's preview.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and you know that's one of my favorite gigs, and it's because of him. And I know he's been described, and people talk about how miserable he is and stuff, but there's something going on with that thing. It's just, well, for me personally, I know some people go, I can take him or leave him.
Oh, God. No.
But for me, it immediately connected to my soul. And I was like, okay, I know I'm getting them.
Jackie Wilson says, the Dominic
so if his management are listening, I will be on the drum throne for him if he requires it.
I mean, everybody always thinks Moondance because that's like kind of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of songs.
It's a lot.
So apparently one of the things is with him, you have to learn about 200.
Yeah.
And he'll call anything. There's no set list. He'll just go, "Wah," and you've got to play it. And obviously the news has to get to the drummer first and then the brass players as they find their parts. But apparently, yeah, you've got to have at least 200 under your belt. But I feel confident about that. With Tori Amos, I learnt 76, which I know is nowhere near 200, but it's quite a lot of songs. Considering with Snow Patrol, I probably learnt 25, and that's it, really.
How was Rod? Did you play live with Rod?
No, sadly not live, but in the studio. It was great. The songs were great. One of the tunes I played on was a duet with Robin Williams, It Takes Two, so it's pretty raunchy rock and roll.
But the classic It Takes Two. It Takes Two.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, with the two of them. Yeah.
I'll go back and
I
listen to it.
don't know if it's Trev's idea, but it was. They're pretty charismatic characters. The pair.
Sure.
It was fun. It really was fun because obviously I'm a massive fan of the Faces and Old Rod,
Which they've got back together
yes,
with Kenny.
yeah, amazing, exactly,
And Ronnie Wood.
Yeah.
Ronnie Wood, yeah.
So when Trev said we're doing a Rod record, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. It was so brilliant. And I know his long-term drummer, Dave Palmer, who's been with him for 30 odd years, actually. And he's still there and brilliant drummer, brilliant character. And I shared that record with I was saying earlier, with Ferroni, because the beautiful parts are on the floor when I went in after him. And I wish I picked him up, but there you go. Yeah, Rod was great. And, you know, the Ronnie connection with Trev. So I've played with Ronnie quite a few times, always some sort of charity event or something like that. I played at a little club, a memorial gig with him, but I've worked with him about 10 times or something. And we were playing at the Roundhouse. It was a charity event. It's a thing being on stage with a Rolling Stone. All of them have a sort of presence that is palpable when they arrive. You know,
When Ronnie and Keith live, just when they get into that thing, it's ridiculous.
Right.
It's just,
what is it? So
magic.
Exactly. So I said to the monitor engineer, "Can you turn Ronnie up like considerably more than anybody else?" He's like, "Yeah." And because I just wanted to see what is he playing? Like, what on earth is he playing? And it's, if you heard it soloed, you'd hear like a little bit of rhythm, a tiny bit of lead, a bend.
Yeah.
And it's sort of soloed. It probably wouldn't make much sense. But if you add it to the music, it's just like this glue that sort of connects everything. Really wonderful experience playing with him. And the feel as well, that to experience what that feels like, genuinely feels like to play with someone that's played rhythm guitar like that. And to actually feel it when you're playing and like that, the connection. It was really amazing. But the thing that blew my nut about that particular gig, Imelda May was guesting and we were playing I'd Rather Go Blind.
Wow.
And she turned around, she came over to Trevor's on bass, and she turned around, she came over to me and she said, "This is Rather Go Blind." She goes, "It's super laid back." She goes, you can't lay back this groove enough. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of know what you're getting at, I think. I get it." She goes, "Honestly," she said, "it can't be back enough." Trevor's sort of fiddling with his amp. And Ronnie goes, "We'll be okay, it's Ash." And I'm like, "Oh my God."
Like, Ronnie Wood knows who I am.
So, that moment just went. I'm thinking, holy shit. Afterwards, Trevor goes, a Rolling Stone knows your name. So that was an absolute moment. But indeed, it's like, you know. And she was awesome, of course, and it builds, and the whole place was, it's really, really...
Stuff she did with Jeff Beck was just phenomenal.
I bet.
Yeah. She's absolutely incredible.
That Ronnie thing, though, it's really brilliant. And I'd play with him again. We were talking about Delamitri earlier, and I was 25 when we opened up for the Stones, and like I'd never done... We played Sheffield Don Valley Stadium with them, and I didn't meet Charlie. And it was like, so gutted. Literally decades later, I'm walking up to South Kensington and there's nobody around. And Charlie Watts is walking across the street and he's impeccably dressed. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just me and him in South Ken in the morning. And I just did the thing that none of us, we've all kind of been conditioned not to do. And that's like bug famous people, because you see it happening all the time. You just go, oh God, I don't want to be that guy. And I just went, it just came out of my mouth. I just went, Charlie. And he went, yeah. And he came over to me. I said, I play drums. He was like, oh, great. Nice to meet you. And I said, listen, I don't expect you to remember, but I was in this band and we opened up for you. And he went, was it good? I said, it was really, really good. He goes, what's the name of your band then? I said, oh, we were called Delamitri. And he went, yeah, you're right. I don't remember. And it with a little wry smile. And I thought, oh man, that's good. And we got chatting. We got chatting about Andy Newmark and stuff. And what an absolute sweet, brilliant bloke.
We've been through some of these songs. I'm looking around here. You're going to talk about Set Fire to the Rain.
Yes, it will sound completely bizarre on this drum kit.
Good.
Because the toms were really, 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 really deep. But essentially, the part Fraser had... Well, we should go right back. So
go right.
I'd worked with Fraser on a few tracks, and often, and it still happens now, producers will just call you to come and do a session.
And you don't know what the artist is.
Don't know who it is. So I turned up at Fraser's studio at the time, which was on Farm Lane in Fulham at the time. Very small little place. I walked through the door with my cymbals and that snare drum up there. And
the Supraphonic?
No, the Yamaha, the little very cheap Yamaha Maple Absolute.
Maple Absolute.
Very simple, pretty cheap snare drum at the time.
And they had a kit already set up?
And they've got a Ludwig kit in there, mainly set up all the time. Bigger toms and a 22-inch bass drum. But as I walked through the door, Adele was just sat on a stool looking at her phone. So I'm like,
And you're like, I'm doing an Adele song.
It's her. Of course, this is 21, so it's pre her being absolutely massive, but I recognised her immediately and knew who it was. Fraser introduced me in and he said, she's going to play drums on this. And she went, who'd you play for? I thought, oh God, this could
You're going to get tested.
This could be tricky. And at the time I was working with Will Young. She went, I love Will Young. I'm like,
you're like,
thank gosh for that. And it transpires that she was at the Brit School when Pop Idol was on TV. A girl in her class had said that he's not going to win it. And I said, what did you do? And she said, I lamped her.
Oh, wow.
So she punched this girl. And she said, and then they expelled me for 3 months. She goes, but it was worth it because he won. So she was an incredible, sort of pretty down-to-earth character. And we chatted about the drum part, and Fraser got this main feel, which won't translate.
No, that's okay.
But essentially, the main part is 4 on the floor with the toms. So it's like a jazz version. We worked on the part she came up with. There's like a sort of, as an overdub, I did some cymbal swells. I did some hi-hat, I think, to go along with that. And then she came up with, she wanted a military idea, like a military snare roll to happen with the part. But she sort of sang something like that in my ear, and I went in And they rolled back the previous take, and I started playing, and then I could see her through the glass, and she's going, "That's it."
Great.
So whatever it was I touched on, that was kind of what she was hearing. What's interesting about that is the fact that she was actually there, because
that was really what was coming up in my mind. How
Right.
often is that happening
Not
now?
very
We're
often.
actually working with the artist.
Well, it happened with Billy Idol, because we were playing together. It happened with Robbie. Robbie was first day of that record that I did with Trevor. Robbie was there. I've done 5 albums with a very famous Irish pop singer, and he's never attended any of the sessions. I've met him, but he's never been at any of the sessions.
Who was the producer?
Various producers.
Okay.
But some of them, Lipson, Mark Taylor, and he's never there. But, you know, that's often how it rolls. So it's a surprise seeing her. The fact that she's involved in the music making as well, and she feels it, you know. And the session was really, really great. And she left, and we cracked a beer open. She got her cab, and Fraser and I had a bottle of beer, and I went, "See you at the Grammys." Ching. Ha 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 ha. Right. About 4 months later, Fraser messaged me and said, "Do you want to come to the Grammys?" I'm like, "Oh my God." He went, "Yeah, she's up for 6."
Nice.
Must have been more than 6.
Did that
later.
song individually win?
So that song, the album won album.
I remember the album winning it, yeah.
The song of the year she won as well, which I think was probably Rolling in the Deep.
Right.
Possibly. But yeah, there's that famous picture of her with all 6.
Incredible.
That week was my sort of craziest week of my music life, really, because I went out and did the Grammys at the weekend and watched her, and you know, was drinking champagne with them all at the end. And then the following weekend, I had a show at the El Rey with Sinead O'Connor.
Oh, wow.
This is 2012.
Yeah, we would have been there. Wish I'd known you then.
Well, I tell you who opened up for us was producer.
Daniel Lanois.
Yes, was opening up for us, because he plays pedal steel like God himself.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. So he was opening up for Sinead. So that was the following weekend.
At the El Rey.
So at the Grammys, and then I thought, you know what, I won't go home. I'll just hang in LA for a week and then do the show with Sinead and come home. And as I'm there, Trevor called me and said, "Are you around for a session?" I said, "Oh, Trevor, I'm in LA." He said, "Oh, let's do it there."
So he flew out.
So he flew out, and then I ended up doing another Seal track, and we were working with Birdie as well up at Trevor's studio in Bel Air. So absolutely bonkers week.
So you're not seeing a correlation that people actually travel to you?
This is
Whether it be Billy Idol, Steve Stick.
I mean, I don't know if it's ever going to happen again, but it's
twice more than most people are ever going to experience.
Yeah, and still Trev, which is incredible. I certainly owe him a lot, that man. You know, people go, "Oh, when you're playing on a track, do you know if it's a hit?" And I don't know how you feel about that. I'm sure people have asked you that, but you can certainly feel if the song's good. Just simple as that. Does it feel like a good song? And then it's like, well, everything else is then, it's like, well, you just never know, really.
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because there's so many correlations. Like when we tracked the drums on How to Save a Life, they'd already been tracked with, what do you call them?
Hot rods.
Hot rods, thank you.
Yeah.
How did you know what I was thinking?
That's enough.
Yeah, and the hot rods just meant it sounded soft.
Yeah. So you used to retrack the drums and make them a bit...
And it was like a really good song. But once we got some real drums on it, you're like, wow, this could be a massive hit.
Yeah.
And it was.
Take note, young producers.
Yeah.
Real drums.
I think the best analogy I heard was, so I was working with this artist, I developed them, got them signed, and they bring in this song because they're running around town, in LA, you know the deal, they go and write with every writer producer in town.
Yeah.
They came in all super excited, like, I've got a hit song. And it was a Cara de Guardia song. They played it to me and I was like, it's good. And they're like, yeah, the label thinks it's going to be a hit. I'm like, I'm not hearing it as a hit. And they're like, well, wait, let me play you the demo. And the demo was basically exactly the same track with Cara singing it. And I was just like, it's a hit with Cara singing it. And I just had to be blunt. I was like, whoever the producer is of this track, probably the co-writer on the song, you need to go back and recut these vocals. I was like, I'm not trying to get the gig to cut your vocals.
Yeah.
Because I know that would just cause a lot of political whatever BS. I was like, but this, with Cara singing, is a hit. You haven't got the feel and the groove right, etc. It's just not translating.
Yeah.
And they took it to heart and went back and recut it, And so sometimes it's like, can be a really good song. I'm sure if I sat down and played Let It Be now, you'd all go, oh, that's a great song. But with Paul McCartney playing Let It Be, it's like, wow, I believe this,
Exactly.
Because that song's about his mother. There was a lot of misconception about it being a Catholic song, and there's probably some stuff about him being Catholic in it. But when he says "Mother Mary comes to me," he's talking about his dead mother coming to him in dreams.
Yeah.
And so, so when he's singing "Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom,"
it's
let
coming
it be,
from a real weighted place.
that Warren's never going to do. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, the vocal performance, getting back to that whole thing that Trevor talks about, because I think Set Fire to the Rain, it's a great mix, it's a great production, but I feel her vocal is just so unbelievable.
But that's a correlation, don't you think? Lisa Stansfield should not be underrated at all. Incredible singer. Yeah.
Great singer.
Yeah, I mean, I see you've got a Celine Dion record.
Yes, that Celine track came on the back of Set Fire to the Rain. The thing that happens, I was sort of explaining to a younger drummer the other day about work, and it's like, well, you can only get sessions if you know producers, and you're only going to get sessions if they're getting sessions.
Sure.
You can't.
So was that another phrase of the song?
So basically, Set Fire to the Rain had happened, which then, of course, attracted Celine to Fraser, and I played on that. There was also a Lily Allen track that we did. There's a whole bunch of tracks that we did on the back of the success of Set Fire to the Rain, and it happens with all of them. They get that moment where all of a sudden they're in the zeitgeist and make the most of it.
How did Tori Amos come about?
I was on The Voice, and my time with The Voice had kind of run out. My sort of love of it had fallen out, and then I had that moment with with Robert Plant, the session coming through with Robert Plant, and I couldn't do it. I'm sat on my drums, not playing them, and it was like the sort of straw that broke the camel's back. And then pandemic happened after that. Post-pandemic, I was saying to my wife, if I go back out on the road, the artist has to be like creatively something I can get my teeth into.
You don't want to be playing to tracks.
I don't want to be playing to tracks. I want to be creating real music with someone. By the way, everyone asks me who's my top artist that I'd like to work with, and Kate Bush is without
I was thinking about it
of a doubt is number one for me. So anyone like that, and I said to her, somebody that credibility wise and like artistically right, and I said obviously financially has to be okay too, because you might get the art, but you're
in the back of the van. You're in the back of the van with the road crew. Yeah.
So it had to, and those gigs are hard to come by.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there and I get, bam, an email lands in my lap from Tori's manager asking me if I'd like to go on the road with her. It was a bit of a shocker because I'm thinking, where have they got where? I was trying to figure out, there's no musicians that, usually it'll be either a crew person, getting back to Rick Wakeman and stuff, another musician that's recommended you.
Or the producers.
Or something. And I couldn't figure out any mutuals at all. It was really weird. And it transpired very briefly that Matt Chamberlain, who'd been touring with her forever, it wasn't him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Matt had recommended a bunch of drummers. Tori had checked them all out. Some of them she liked the look of, some of them she didn't. And she was at dinner with her daughter. Mm-hmm. And she said to her daughter, I'm having real problems finding a drummer. Her daughter and her boyfriend at the time, who's a bass player, came up with 3 names. The first name was Keith Carlock, Steely Dan Keith Carlock.
Yep.
The second drummer was Chris Dave, amazing hip-hop drummer that plays with D'Angelo, has played on nearly every Adele record, but doesn't really mention it. But he played on a lot of Adele records. Amazing drummer, worth checking out. If your drummers are watching, check out Chris Dave. Most of you are aware of him. And the third drummer was me. And this is how it rolled.
Did she audition all 3 of you?
No. So what happened was, I think the first choice was Keith, because he's at the top of the list. And Keith has been consistently very, very busy with Steely Dan, and he couldn't do it. So it went to the second guy, and Chris Dave musically is not the ideal match for Tori Amos. And also I think there was a financial wrangle, money-wise, something was a bit skew with. I don't know exactly what. And so I was third on the list. And so she started checking out videos of me playing. For all the skeptical people out there that think, oh, I'm not posting videos, it's just kids do it. That is the first port of call for any artist.
That's good information.
And she started checking videos of me playing online, Instagram mainly, I suspect. And then little did I know that in between that time, Keith Carlock had sent an email to the manager saying, oh, by the way, if you're looking for somebody in the UK, I can't recommend Ash Soan higher enough. So she'd already been looking. That email came through from Keith, and that was that. And I got a message from the manager saying she'd love you to do it. I'm like, does she not want to hear me? He went, no. She knows what she wants. And I'm like, wow. Okay. So I'm really thankful to Keith, and I call him my sort of fairy godmother of drums because I had another really weird one. I was at home and I got a text from Emilio, who's the guy, founding member of Tower of Power.
Oh, wow.
And he asked me if I'd like to join the band. And it basically, the long and the short of it was 200 shows, 200 days at least in America. So essentially they wanted me to move to the States. And I'm like, well, I've got children at school. I'm really flattered. And I said, oh, thank David, as in thank David Garibaldi very much for the recommendation. He said, oh, it wasn't David, it was Keith Carlock. So Keith had put me up for it again.
So I want to hear more playing.
I want to hear some more playing.
I do. This is the fun part.
Yeah. Well, this kit, so it's 60s, and I'm trying to make it, that, like I talked about earlier, about it being, it sounds like a vintage 60s kit.
Yep.
In the room, and hopefully it will when you hear it recorded. But also there's that, all, like I mentioned earlier, all of the loops and all of the hip hop things and everything that in contemporary music, a lot of it is come from original recordings that were done in the 60s and 70s and the processing that they did. So I've been experimenting with that. And a lot of it is this incredible high tom sound. Beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous, yeah.
But that, and it just sounds like that, the whole Al Green thing. A modern kit will sound like this, but there's something about it when it's actually that era when the music was created like that,
It's interesting with Ring because, there was such a period, you probably went through this as well, particularly in like 90s, where everybody was just deadening everything else. There was no personality left on the kit.
All of a sudden the 70s came along and people were deadening stuff. Yeah. Right. I mean, I love that sound too. Don't get me wrong. And it's sort of an easier sound to get, a more controlled sound like that. Getting back to Steve Jordan, by the way, I heard a podcast which apparently doesn't exist anymore, but he was talking. This is one of the reasons why I got this place and started getting involved in recording drums. He said that he would go into a session, track the drums, he'd get the kit sounding how he wanted it to sound, record, go back into the control room, sit down, 9 times out of 10, be disappointed at what he was hearing back. Not his playing, but the sonic reproduction that he was hearing in the room. So it really prompted him to become an engineer. Because he wanted to be represented properly, and I sort of know what he means. And it is a brilliant. Now we're in the world that we're in. A great way of taking control of your sound is like literally learn how to do the thing, and you can, and everybody seemingly is.
I think that's one of the beauties. We were talking about this on the car ride up. How in all creative arts there used to be. We'd have the lighting director, the DP, the first AD, the second, you get my point. Yeah. And now the tools are such that you can do 5 of these jobs. You don't always want to, but it is a reality. There's kind of not a lot of excuse. I mean, somebody used to come in and align the tape machine, bias it, want to do edits. Yeah.
I know. Well, now there's vocal producers, right? And there's a couple of them that I know that are very, very successful, and they don't touch any other instrument other than the vocal. And it's a bona fide gig. Amazing. I don't know how long that's been a thing.
I mean, there's people that are good at tracking vocals. There's always been a little bit of that. I remember Dan Rothschild told me that his dad had a guy who was like the best at fades.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I've heard all kinds of stuff. But then there was also a percussionist that they used who literally was just tambourines and shakers.
Right.
That would run around LA studios
Do that.
just doing...
God, can you imagine? Yeah. Amazing. Well, one of the things, I mentioned him earlier, Louis Jardine, fantastic percussionist, played bass on Slave to the Rhythm and percussion. He showed me an incredible trick, which I've got to show you. So I just need to grab any shaker. Louis, when we did the Robbie album, we did a gig at the Roundhouse, and it was a huge. It's available on iPlayer now on the BBC, and Trevor ran the band, and there's about 40 people in the band, and Carl Brazil and myself shared the drums. And if you weren't playing drums, if the other guy was playing drums, you'd go and sit with one of the percussionists. So I'd always go with Louis, and he's playing congas. And I picked up a shaker, and he was going down, down. I thought, what? Like I thought, do you want me to sit down? And he kept just going down, down. And what he was getting at, and he showed me afterwards, and this is an absolute nugget of gold, is that people try and play swing with a shaker. But if you just rely on physics, the swing can come. So a straight 16th note or 8th note, and as you go down, it naturally swings. I'm not playing that.
Yeah.
And then, so you can find a lovely little sweet spot somewhere in the middle, which is not quite swung and not quite straight. And same applies to tambourine.
Yeah.
That's completely straight. And as you turn your hand, it's the gravity of the jing
amazing.
Going up. And he showed me that, Louis. And I thought, that's an amazing thing. Bit of information, knowledge coming from an absolute legend. But secondly, I remember thinking, he now knows that the landscape of recording and sessions is changing. And very often I'll play drums on a track, and then the producer will say, can you do some tambo? Whereas in the old days, they wouldn't do that. They would hire Louis. But he's given me that information, and I remember thinking, God, that's really amazing. He's just giving, because technically he's doing himself out of a job by showing me that. And I remember thinking, God, what an amazing character.
It's lovely,
because he just wants to share,
spread the information,
something really cool, really amazing.
I'd never heard that one before.
And it's absolutely brilliant. And if you do it in front of drummers, then you give it to somebody to try. You can just see their minds being blown right in front of you. It's crazy.
Yeah,
completely swung, and you don't have to do anything, because to demonstrate, you can make it swing in this position, but you have to think about the same motion as you would do if you're playing a hi-hat swung. So you have to play it swung, and that's a lot more effort than just. And it's brilliant. It works with tambo as well. Getting back to some of the sounds, I just love the fact that it sounds 60s and 70s in.
Are you a big Bonham fan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kit obviously doesn't.
No.
We talked about that. The Supraphonic, amazing. Bonham's an interesting one. If you think about "Fall in the Rain." So
do not understand. There's something going on here. The number one groove, and I was about to say the number one groove that separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, is "Fall in the Rain."
It's such a weird track, isn't it?
I've had people tell me this is "Fall in the Rain," and I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. You know that.
Yeah. What is interesting is that, without a shadow of a doubt, he was listening to Steely Dan. There's no.
I was going to ask you to play.
I don't think there's. I mean, you're probably going to get viral comments. But I'm pretty sure there's that that's where it's come from, is that he's heard Purdy and he's gone, hang on a minute. Different sound, obviously. That's the thing. And I'm absolutely sure, timing wise, he would have listened to Purdy. There's no way.
When you hear that the track's soloed, and he's playing all those fills, the groove never stops.
Yeah, he's a monster.
I can solo hundreds of different drummers that we all love, and they'll come in the fill, and you hear them push and pull, coming back in and out. It just never changes.
He's amazing, wasn't he?
That kick and snare just stays the same. Doesn't matter if it goes
for a farmer from the Black Country, whatever he was.
Yeah, who was 19 on the first record.
Wow.
Yeah, they were kids, him and Robert.
Well, the other one that people talk about a lot is the sound of him and how big the sound was. But if you think about modern drummers like Dave Grohl or whatever, and like they're properly hitting hard.
Mm-hmm.
They're hitting really hard. And I would go as far as to stick my head above the parapet and go, they're hitting harder than Bonham did, for sure. The size of the sound that he created was from him. Yeah. From the drums and the way he had it tuned and the way that he connected to the drums.
And it's that getting the stick to leave the head quick enough so it actually resonates.
Makes it, the open sound that he got. And
kick drums in particular, I have a problem with a lot of drummers that, you've got to do this.
Well, I always bury, because that's how I've always done it. And there's you could do a whole video on do you, should you. And again, the comments are going to be brilliant now.
Comments below,
Yeah, I remember Jeff Porcaro, burying the beater each time and going, okay, well, that's musically where I'm headed. I was really into him. I still am. But this kit, that whole hip hop thing, and I'm going down that rabbit hole, I have been for ages. But it translates really well. This thing with the compression and this particular cymbal, I'll play it and you'll hear what I'm getting at. It's really cool.
Amazing.
Because it's got that whole, could be a 60s loop, is it? But as soon as you start processing it in a certain way, and it sounds contemporary. So I've just been going down that whole road with that. And, same with the hip hop side stick. I got into reggae because of Stuart, basically. And I remember as a kid hearing, it was something off Zenyatta Mondata. And because they were using the Space Echo, I didn't, at like 14 or 15, I didn't know what that was. So I tried to play what I'd heard. And I think he was actually playing this, Stuart.
Yeah.
But because of all the rebound from the Space Echo, it didn't sound like that at all. It sounded like this. So I learned to play something that sounded a bit like it. I remember showing it him. He went, "Holy shit, you figured that out!" I was like, "Well, I kind of had to, because I didn't know what it was." As a 14, whatever year old it was.
It was like the reggae guys with the chant. They go chant, 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 chant. They play it.
Actually play it rather than... Exactly.
Yeah.
But yes, Stuart definitely was one for me.
Incredible.
And then later on, it's really weird that I'm a sort of... One of the best things about getting old, if you can think of a best thing. But what the thing that I definitely am really sort of happy about is you've got the luxury of being able to look over your time and be able to connect the dots, which you can't have when you're 25 because you have not been doing it long enough. But at my age and your age, you can start going, that makes sense. You can look back and go, that, because when you're on it, it's not apparent. But after 20, 30 years, you go, that connects now. I get it. And one of the things for me, what's really quite spooky is the connection between Trevor and, like, who knew that Trevor and Lowell had a band with Stuart Copeland, like when they were in LA, when they were both working there. And I would end up working for both of them and then end up me and Stuart, and the whole Yes connection, and like it really quite weird. And Slave to the Rhythm, really, the fact that I learned that groove as a teenager, and actually it was essentially my audition with Trev, and I didn't know it. So yeah, and you can only see that after a little bit of time and go, wow, that was incredible. But yeah, Stuart for sure, and I feel very very lucky that I ended up knowing him. He's on my EP, and that was during pandemic. We were all losing our minds, and we did this track called Completely Sane. And I asked him actually to play drums on it. He goes, no. He goes, you got that covered. And he played guitar and bass and keyboards, and he probably would have sang on it actually if the pandemic had gone on any longer. I mean, there's definitely a bit of luck involved in this game, for sure.
But you have to have the talent to back it up, and you have to have done the work, you know.
It's definitely effort. If there's one thing I will say, all of the successful people that I've been very fortunate to have been around, there's one thing that connects them all, and it's that.
Yeah.
Nobody
work harder than everybody else around you.
To them on a plate.
Yeah.
No one.
Yeah.
Everybody's worked and continue to, actually, which is interesting. I mean, I certainly feel like I'm still working towards something. I don't know what it is, but I'm still going. And I know that Trevor and Lowell are actually in the studio now working on something.
Lowell Cream as well. Wow.
Lowell is a whole show in itself, by the way.
10cc, like, wow. What a band.
Unbelievable.
And them as producers and video makers.
Yeah. In the end, they went on.
And he invented a gizmo. He invented all these different things.
Yeah. Him and Kevin.
Yeah.
Brilliant creative stoners.
Godly and Cream, yeah.
He tells me a great story, Lol, about they just got, this is pre-10cc, they got this new desk, and they were fiddling about, and they got Kevin to play the drums, and he was playing this beat over and over and over and over again. And Lol said he seemed pretty bored and lonely, so he said, I got guitar, and I went in and I sat down in front of the bass drum and just made up this little nursery rhyme to the beat that he was playing. And it was like, I'm a Neanderthal man, you're a Neanderthal woman, let's make Neanderthal love. And it went round and round, and they were like, yeah, whatever. And he said, it just so happens a record company guy stuck his head in and said, what's that? And they went, oh, this is our new desk. He went, no, not the desk. What's the song? And they went, it's just Lowell messing around with Kevin. And he went, that's a hit. And he gave him some money to re-record it properly. And indeed it was. That was Hot Legs.
Yeah.
So he is definitely, there's a whole show in Lowell.
Yeah.
This is pre-10cc.
I heard Graham Gordon on the radio we were driving a couple of days ago. I mean,
bonkers.
Yeah, Graham Gordon wrote For Your Love, which was a massive hit for the Yardbirds, and he was 19.
Yeah, because that's right. Lowell always talks about him as being like an experienced songwriter before they met him. He'd already had hits, and he knew how to do it. And yeah, amazing. Yeah, I wish they were here now with us, because it'd be dark by the time you leave.
Yeah,
but yeah, Lowell, incredible. And again, the most interesting thing for me about Lowell is the fact that he's ever present. Like there's something coming from him, a lyric, a melody, a groove, a chord, a line, something coming from him at all times. Just omnipresent creatively, brilliant to be around. And you can't put your finger on it, what it is exactly that Lowell does. But I remember Steve Lipson talking about our record that we did together. And he said, there's every single song, there's something that leads back to Lowell. A guitar part, a melody, like a lyric, a groove, something. They're really amazing, and still is incredibly creative.
Amazing.
And again, I feel pretty blessed to have sort of witnessed that, in full flight. Is kind of cool. Slave to the Rhythm, I kind of, I listen to it a lot. And the original drummer is a guy called William Juju House.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know from talking to Steve, it's a two-bar loop, really. And it's based on a sort of go-go groove. But because of my, I've got much more connection to Jeff Porcaro, I sort of Porcaro-ized it. So it's a kind of an amalgamation. It's like if Jeff would have played this groove. So I keep a constant shuffle hi-hat going, whereas if you listen to the original, Juju's playing some pretty amazing stuff on the hi-hats. But I've always kept it pretty simple here. So this is my take on it.
Amazing. Ash has agreed to let's have these little loops of performances and stuff. So there will be a link down below. You can download and, I don't know,
have fun with it.
Have fun with them.
None of it's clicks, but it's just you can mess around with playing, you can loop it and
create some tracks, create some great music. This has been an absolute blast. Here in the Windmill?
In the Windmill studio in Norfolk, yeah. Well, I'm it's really nice to get visitors, if I'm honest. So it's great.
It was great. We had a lovely time. It's beautiful in here.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much for having us.
Hopefully see you again.
Oh, you won't be able to get rid of this now.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everyone. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, goodbye, ciao.